Welcome to the PreSnap Podcast presented by LineStar. Alongside my co-host Tyler Wiemann, I am Shannon Sommerville, and today on the show we are talking about a very hot topic as we approach fantasy football draft season and NFL training camp around the corner. The question is, who will be this year's Puka Nacua? Of course, last year the wide receiver for the Rams dominated in fantasy football, finished wide receiver 4 in half PPR points, which of course is what Best Ball uses. So Tyler, what was your assessment of Puka Nacua's performance last year from a fantasy perspective? Especially, I got to give you credit. You were one who was touting him all off season. And in fact, the first week of the season, you took him for a prop bet. I was very proud co-host moment for me.
I wouldn't say I touted him all off season. I did like him coming into week 1. We did take him for a prop bet at it was 1.5 receptions at plus 140 or something like that, which just sounds hilarious now after seeing everything that he did. So, I was on him a little bit, but this is a guy that for most of draft season last year was the last pick of the draft. He closed at ADP 170, and that's just not the situation he was in for a majority of the summer. I think he did get a big boost in his draft capital once Cooper Kupp got hurt. So I think that's kind of what put him on everybody's radar.
Yeah, Puka Nacua, his whole season was just incredible. He was drafted in the 5th round, like you said, finishing ADP 170, but then just was churning out fantasy points week in, week out, and definitely delivered for fantasy owners, but also broke a ton of rookie receiving records in the process. Will we see that again? Highly unlikely, but we're going to go through 5 candidates who we think might fit that criteria and have the potential to put up some points, at least give you some value in your best ball drafts late in the draft. Now, as criteria for ourselves for this show, we've seen a lot of experts across the industry kind of weigh in on this very topic, but for our purposes, we are going to make this 5th. So because Puka Nacua was a 5th rounder drafted in best ball ADP 170, we want to make this like a dark horse kind of show here. So all picks that we're going to go through are going to be drafted 3rd round or later and have an ADP in best ball 180 or later, so that we're really going through guys that are going to be in a similar kind of dark horse situation to Puka Nacua, and we'll have some fun with it. There were some other guys we were looking at, but they were just being drafted too high, so the value wasn't quite there. But we'll still give those out at the end of the show, some other candidates that could be Puka Nacua-like in the terms of that fantasy production. But before we get into it, do me a huge favor right now. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. Let us know how your best ball drafts are going. And if you don't have Underdog Fantasy Best Ball yet, download the Underdog Fantasy app. Use the promo code LineStar, and you'll get a deposit match up to $250, plus you'll get 1 free month of the LineStar app, which everybody got to have the LineStar app for football season to help you in all of your daily fantasy plus prop betting. And now we are going to soon have a new best ball rankings tool that also has a lot of other tools to go along with that, like the playoffs, implied point totals, everything you need to kind of dominate a fantasy best ball draft. So that's coming out on LineStar. Stay tuned for that and stay tuned to the channel. Now let's get into our 5 candidates that could put up Puka Nacua-like numbers this season, or at least we're going to try to predict. First one we're going to is a name that's very synonymous with fantasy football, and that's a McCaffrey. Luke McCaffrey, though, for the Washington Commanders, was drafted in the 3rd round of this year's NFL draft from Rice. ADP 184, going wide receiver 81 in those best ball drafts. And Tyler, this was a guy who actually played quarterback a lot in college and only recently switched to wide receiver. So I think his potential as a wide receiver hasn't even been realized yet. We also know he's got a good last name, especially when it comes to football. So what are your thoughts on how he could make an impact this year in fantasy football?
Yeah, I think his landing spot in Washington was just an interesting one. One, they got a new quarterback in Jalen Daniels, who obviously has some very, very high upside. Two is the receiver core they have. They have Scary Terry and then Jahan Dotson, who Jahan Dotson has never topped 530 yards in a season yet. I just don't think he is that good as an NFL wide receiver. He was also drafted by the last Washington Commanders coaching regime. So we have a guy coming in Luke McCaffrey that was just drafted by the new coaches in a situation where Jahan Dotson may not be that good and could walk into being the second on the team in targets. And then if something happens to McLaurin, I mean, what does their number one look like? It is either going to be Dotson or McCaffrey, and my money right now would be on McCaffrey over Dotson.
Yeah, and that's a really good point when we're assessing some of these players, these rookies. It's not just the talent level of the player, it's also the situation that they're going to. And the situation he's going to in Washington, while we don't know a lot about what that offense is really going to look like with Cliff Kingsbury now as the offensive coordinator there and Jaden Daniels, the rookie quarterback, what we do know about Cliff Kingsbury is he likes to throw the ball a lot. So that bodes well for those receivers. What also bodes well is Luke McCaffrey's numbers in college. He lined up wide 28.7% of the time and slot 70.6% of the time. And Washington lost their primary slot receiver, Curtis Samuel. So this bodes well for him to kind of fit into that role in Washington if that's how they employ him. We still don't know a lot about, again, how this offense is going to look, but when you're doing these best ball drafts, you're kind of just taking shots at people. And with Luke McCaffrey, I think that's a decent shot to take. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're talking about him going in the 180s and having, a path to playing a lot with a upside quarterback, I think it's a pretty interesting spot to take some shots. They also play Atlanta in week 17, which should be a good game to target.
Yeah, this Falcons offense is going to put up some points as well. So an interesting offense definitely to keep our eye on as we head into training camp. But Luke McCaffrey could be a name to keep in mind. Next up, we're going to the Tampa Bay Bucks and their wide receiver, Jalen McMillan. He was drafted in the third round out of Washington, going ADP 188.6 in best ball drafts right now, wide receiver 82 off the board. Now, interesting situation here. He goes to an offense that has some pretty good receivers themselves in Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, but this is no stranger to playing with some good wide receivers. In college, he did it at Washington with Rome Odunze and Jalen Polk, so he knows how to be productive in those situations where he's competing for targets. But how do you see him fitting into this Bucs team?
One thing that's wild to me about him playing with those other two wide receivers, he only played 7 games in college last year. In 5 of them, he had at least 100 yards or a touchdown. So he was able to produce in multiple different ways with elite guys next to him. But now breaking down his situation. So Cohen is the new offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He comes from that Sean McVay coaching tree, that Rams type offense where they use 3 wide receivers a lot. So there is a chance that McMillan could beat out Trey Palmer to be on the field, in 3 wide sets most of the time. Now you talk about the 2 wide receivers that are currently there. We know Mike Evans is a beast, but he's turning 31. There is the chance for a little bit of diminishing returns on him. Chris Godwin last year did not have a very good season. Looked like he dropped off big time. Now he is still only 28 and they moved him out wide last season. It does seem like they're going to have him in the slot this year, so he could bounce back, but does he still have it? Maybe he just dropped off. We're not really sure about that. That's yet to be seen, but I think there is a path to McMillan playing a lot and playing well in a situation where we have seen targets really only go to a couple places in this offense. So I think it's pretty interesting spot for McMillan being drafted so late.
And this is another offense that I'm curious to see how it all works out, especially with Baker Mayfield coming off his career season. Is he able to kind of maintain that level of success? Now, it might have been, we've talked before about how last year might have been a ceiling year for Mayfield, but will his production drop off that significantly? Likely not. And you're also, when you look at Puka Nacua in the situation he stepped into an offense that had some pretty good receivers. Cooper Kupp, who was a fantasy star the year prior. So, it's not always you can't be too scared of going to an offense that has good receivers on it already in place, because as you know, anything can happen. Like we saw with Cooper Kupp, he was injured for the season. So that's where you can kind of take some risk. And Jalen McMillan, not a bad pick there at 188. So some good value there late in the draft. Next up, let's head to the New England Patriots and Javon Baker, who currently ADP 198, wide receiver 93 off the board. He was drafted by the Patriots in round 4 out of UCF, and there was a lot of experts who kind of profiled him more as like a second rounder, but still made it to the Patriots and is stepping into a situation where it seems like with this Patriots offense, there's a lot of opportunity there for someone to step up in the receiving corps. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is a situation where their receiving core is Demario Douglas, Kendrick Bourne, KJ Osborne, Polk, was a first-round rookie, and then Baker. So there's, these group of guys where a couple of them are going to have to separate. My money would be on Baker and Polk to do that. And Baker's an interesting case. I mean, he is a guy that had a giant target share in college. He knows how to get targets. He knows how to get open. And in a receiver core where you're really not too sure about everybody, I'm going to bet on the guy that knows how to get open to get those targets in play. Mm-hmm. He can run all the routes. He can win downfield. He can win in press or zone. He's not, a great athlete, but he's good enough. And my one worry for him is there was kind of a lack in focus at times for him in college where, he troubled with some drops. But, the big thing is he knows how to get open. He knows how to get targets. And that is definitely the best way to, hit the ground running.
Yeah, and I think you alluded to those, somewhat off-field issues with him, and I think that's why he dropped on a lot of draft boards. However, the talent is definitely there, and in fact, looking at some of the stats, he had the 11th highest PFF receiving grade in the draft class last season, posted higher yards per route run average than Rome Odunze, and already has had some pretty insane highlight reel catches in OTAs, and apparently, according to the beat reporters, making a lot of contested catches that are just really impressive so far. So impressing early on here with the Patriots. That bodes well for our prognosis here as a likely candidate to replace Puka Nacua in your fantasy, or at least maybe provide a little value for you at the very least there. So also 97th percentile in college target share. So he can handle the target share is what it comes down to. And hopefully will deliver on that front. So
yeah, we definitely have to worry about quarterback play here a little bit.
Yeah.
But you take quarterback play out of it, and I think he is in a great spot.
All right. Next up, let's go to the Baltimore Ravens, who also, they don't have really a quarterback situation. Lamar Jackson is the guy there, but the wide receiver that we're looking at is going to be Devontez Walker, wide receiver for the Baltimore Ravens that was taken in round 4 out of UNC, ADP 201.9, wide receiver 84 off the board. And Tyler, this is one that I was really high on because I've follow a lot of college football and I was super excited for him this season. And he didn't really have, I think, the best season that he could have had because he was dealing with all those transfer. The NCAA was messing up his transfer to UNC and he wasn't able to play for the first couple weeks of the season. So I really don't think we got to see Tez Walker in his best form. And I just think maybe that's a little bit why he kind of got drafted so low and dropped so low in a lot of draft boards. But I think he has like insane talent level. And when I was looking into it more, he actually had really similar college stats to Puka Nacua, who, he was a 5th rounder, so we're looking at a 4th rounder here. And as you look, I made a graph here with the different stats, and you can see, neither one really jumped off the board, but where they did was in their career targeted QB rating. So essentially, when a quarterback is targeting them, what their quarterback rating is when they're targeting them. And Puka Nacua was 5th. You can see Tez Walker was 7th. And when you look at the situation that Puka Nacua went into with the Rams, they were averaging 23.8 points per game. The Ravens averaged 28.4 points per game, which ranked 4th. So also going to a high-powered offense. And actually, when you look at the quarterback situation, Matt Stafford and Jackson, they had similar passing numbers, actually, not too far off. Stafford, 34 pass attempts per game, 264 passing yards, 1.6 passing touchdowns, and Jackson, 28 pass attempts, 230 passing yards, and 1.5 passing touchdowns per game. Already, Todd Monken, Harbaugh, they're really impressed with what they've seen from Tez Walker. Tyler, what do you think of this situation here?
I mean, it's coming into a situation with a known, 1A, 1B with Andrews and Flowers. Those two are going to be the main targets. If one gets hurt, though, a lot of targets open up. And I think Tez Walker easily could end up being the wide receiver, too. He's also a guy that ran like a 4.36 40. So he's got some speed with him. He can open up that downfield passing game for them, which works pretty well for Baltimore when they can get it. You get Lamar scrambling a little bit and down the field becomes a little more open for a bomb to Walker. Makes some sense to me. I like it. I think he's being drafted late enough that I'm definitely going to have some of him. And he is a guy I've been targeting when I have Lamar as a quarterback for me.
All right, nice. And lastly, let's round off our list of potential candidates that could potentially have a Puka Nacua-like season. And we're going to the Los Angeles Chargers and Brenden Rice, their rookie wide receiver, ADP 215.1, wide receiver 102 off the board. So this is a really late flyer here for us on Underdog Fantasy Best Ball drafts. But when you look at that Los Angeles Chargers receiving room, they've lost a lot of their weapons, and somebody's got to fill those voids in the target share. Why not Rice?
Yeah, and when we see ADP 215, that's pretty much saying that he's not being drafted in most drafts right now. This is a guy that's totally off the board. He still has to fight for a job to be on the Chargers team right now, but I think he's going to get it. This is a guy he's big and strong at the wide receiver spot, 6'2", 210, similar size, speed to Puka. The wide receiver room, they lost Keenan Allen, they lost Mike Williams. Quentin Johnson might just be a bust. He was also drafted by the last coaches. So, Harbaugh and company don't really have to stick with the kid if they don't want to. And I think Rice, there is the chance he is their best downfield threat. He is also an excellent blocker from the wide receiver spot. And I think this is a part that is so interesting to me because this Chargers team is expected to run the ball a lot. So blocking could be the way he gets on the field a little bit more, makes that team, and is able to produce. His weaknesses, the whole reason he went in round 7, are all have the ability to be fixed just from a strong work ethic and working hard. And this is Jerry Rice's kid. So is there a possibility that he has that work ethic? Personally, I think so. He had over 700 yards, 12 touchdowns last year, and you have a very, very good quarterback throwing him the ball.
Yeah, I think this is a really nice spot for a rookie wide receiver to land. Again, this is going to be probably a more run-heavy offense. However, they've got Justin Herbert, so it's not like they're not going to throw the ball this season. They're going to have to find some places for him to throw it to, especially given the fact that you listed off all those receivers that are no longer in LA. So we've got to look to some other guys. Another one that we could look at, but he was being drafted really high in best ball right now, and that's Ladd McConkey, who I'm also a fan of, not just because he's a Georgia Bulldog, but because I think he's also going to produce this season, hopefully for fantasy football. But in terms of, he's a little bit high for us to include in this category because it's not so much of a dark horse situation there with Ladd McConkey. Yeah. So do you want to mention the other guys that we wanted to include on this list, but they're just a little bit being drafted too high or were drafted a little bit too early for us to include them in the parameters that we had set for ourselves, and that's Jalen Polk with the Patriots. He was drafted in the second round, but ADP 139.1, so it was kind of like right on the cusp there, but in a really great spot with the Patriots, especially given the opportunity when we talked about Javon Baker. He's stepping into that same situation where someone can step up easily and just fill the void here on this offense that was completely anemic last year. But now you've got an all new coaching staff taking over and trying to revamp this New England Patriots team with a new quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, and everything we talked about opportunity-wise goes for Polk. However, Polk is just more likely to get it done than Baker just due to the draft capital they gave him. So I love the spot for Polk, but like you said, ADP is 139. So just outside of the parameters, but he's absolutely in a great spot to do well this year.
And another guy that was outside our parameters, but we wanted to include him, is also Jermaine Burton with the Cincinnati Bengals. Another guy that could really be a fantasy boom for some people, especially considering the offense he's going on to. I know they've got some pretty talented top two wide receivers already kind of cemented into their status there in Cincinnati. But Burton, ADP 151.1, wide receiver 70 off the board. And he was drafted in the 3rd round. And that was kind of a surprise to a lot of people because when scouts kind of assessed him, they assessed him having 1st round talent. However, there were some, I guess, issues with maturity level off the field. However, I think he's going to a situation in Cincinnati that he'll do well with guys like Joe Burrow, who are very established leaders, and some other receivers that are just cemented themselves as, top of the NFL, like Jamar Chase there, to kind of help guide him. So this could be a really good situation for him. What do you think?
Yeah, I really like where he landed here. The reason being, one, Tyler Boyd was the 2nd target earner on Cincinnati last year. He's gone. The other reason, Higgins been injury prone. He's never played over 14 games in a season. Last season, he only played 11. I think there's once again a chance that Higgins misses some time. And if that happens, it just helps Burton. And he's got a really good quarterback throwing him the ball. So
another thing I was reading about was that Jamar Chase apparently really wants to work more in the slot opportunities. And what that could do is, if that's the case, then and without Boyd there, that could really kind of open the door a bit to Burton on the outside. So I kind of, you got to I don't know if that's true or if that's just Jamar Chase, saying he just wants that. And who knows if there's any truth to that, but it's something to keep an eye on as we head into training camp and watch some preseason football.
Yeah. And with that being said, if Jamar Chase does get into the slot more, his floor from a DFS or season long perspective goes way up just because he's going to get more targets. Might not be, as deep, but he's going to get a ton of action out of the slot if he is there more.
Yeah, Jermaine Burton, though, great player, a lot of talent. He used to play for the Georgia Bulldogs before going to Alabama, so doesn't have a soft spot in my heart like Lad McConkey does, but, trader, exactly. But still like him for fantasy football. And so those are the guys we think could potentially provide value that Puka Nacua did last year, although, saying that is even crazy to say. Puka Nacua's season was just so unbelievable last year for fantasy. Not sure anyone can replicate it, but hey, we gave you guys some candidates. Hopefully you can maybe take one of those guys in your best ball draft, and hopefully he can deliver for you guys. Let us know who you think will be this year's Puka Nacua. Drop it in the comments below. And make sure, if you haven't already by this point in the video, like this video if you're enjoying our content. Subscribe to our channel. Keep up with all the latest content we've got coming out. We've already got tons of video out on Best Ball. We'll be doing weekly drafts too for Underdog Fantasy Best Ball, so make sure you join us on our live streams with that. Having a lot of fun here on LineStar. And then make sure you stay tuned because we are coming out with Best Ball rankings and tools to help you guys in your drafts. So stay tuned if you are a LineStar subscriber already. Can't wait for you guys to be able to try out this tool. Tyler and I have already gotten a little sneak peek, and we are so excited to be able to unveil that to you in the coming weeks. So hope you enjoyed this video. Good luck in all of your best ball drafting, and we'll see you guys next time.